So, good evening, everybody. I'm Dionne Simpson, and welcome to Warrior Women, an evening with me and friends. Today's event is a celebration in honour of International Women's Day. We welcome you to join us today for our panel discussion to celebrate and acknowledge the warrior women amongst us. Yes, I'm really, really honoured to be able to deliver this event tonight with such an amazing panel and with you guys as well tuning in for this session. So whether you are joining us as a survivor of domestic abuse or as an advocate, a professional, or you are a faith leader or part of a faith community, or just somebody who's interested, I just want to thank you for being part of this really, really important discussion and conversation. So throughout this evening, we'd love you to engage on the YouTube comment section. So if you're able to, we'd love for you to post your comments, your thoughts, if you've got questions for any of the panel members or any of the things that we bring up today. Just a note about safety. So obviously we do advise anybody who's currently experiencing domestic abuse, please be conscious that if you do post a comment, it's going to show your profile picture and your profile on there. So you might prefer to not do that, in which case you can email me directly at author@dionsimpson.co.uk. We will be discussing elements of domestic abuse this evening. Nothing, very detailed or graphic, but as you know, that healing journey, people can get triggered by all kinds of things that are not even directly related. So we do advise for you to, take care of yourself. If you are, feeling anxious, worried, you're getting symptoms from stress, please don't feel bad about, putting us on mute, going away and coming back in 5 or 10 minutes. But this session is also recorded, so you can also choose to come back and rewatch the session at a later date. I think that's it for just, a bit of self-care. So before we begin, I do have an important update about today's event. Unfortunately, our host, Marcia Spence, has been unable to join us tonight due to a family emergency. So I just want to, shout out our thoughts and well wishes to her and her loved ones and just pray for their comfort and strength. And because Marcia is the founder of Marcia and Publishing House, who are the publishers of my latest book, I have decided to postpone the book launch element that we were due to do this evening for The Sabotaged Girl. So we will be doing that at a later date. So for those of you who have registered, I'll obviously keep you updated to the new date and time for that, which will be rescheduled when Marcia is able to do that with us. So that does mean our agenda has shifted slightly today, and in place of the book launch, we decided to extend our panel discussion, which, secretly, I'm actually really pleased about. I just think, the stories of real women are so important and continue to be important. You don't have to search very far to, look at tragedies on the news and, the prevalence of domestic abuse in the UK where I'm from. And, it's equally as bad, if not worse, in other countries. So it's, definitely a topic that needs not only discussion, but action. So I'm hoping and praying that there are people who are joining and engaging with this, who, have some power to make changes, even if it's just a change in their own kind of small circle. That would be amazing. So tonight we're going to be celebrating resilience, faith and the strength of women who've not only survived domestic abuse, but have fought back to reclaim their lives. So each one of us here this evening has a story, a story that includes pain and struggle, but it also includes victory and success. And just part of my, honouring International Women's Day, I want to be able to really look at those, not just at the successes, but actually, the process of how they came to being, and what things we can share with you guys that actually helped us to power through some of the trauma that we've experienced. So we're hoping that by sharing these things, that it's going to, shine a light on some of the realities of abuse, but also how often it intersects with faith and belief. So we will be talking about, each one of us has a Christian faith. And although we're speaking from a perspective of Christian faith, a lot of the things that we discuss are actually relevant irrespective of your faith background. So I think there are a lot of similarities. So we're hoping that by kind of highlighting some of these things, that we will, one, be able to, help people to find their way out of those situations, but also bring on more allies who are able to support people going through these sorts of situations. So it's not just about storytelling today, really it's about education, empowerment and action. So this evening we're also really proud, I'm especially proud to introduce the Lioness Relaunch, which is an online domestic abuse training program. It's got lots of different modules, let's say, and different topics. So I'm super proud because Yvette Dooley is also my cousin, so we grew up together, and it's been such a full circle moment to be able to kind of connect in this way. So I'm super proud of her. So some of the courses that she has are designed for churches and Christian communities to help ensure that victims aren't ignored or turned away. But it also there are courses that are really vital for people working in public sector or frontline professionals who may be a lifeline to victims from different cultural and faith backgrounds. So there's some really key training available. So Yvette's going to come and talk to us about that later on today. Before we begin, obviously we just want to say that if you are experiencing domestic abuse, you're not alone. And if you at any point need help, if you're in an emergency situation, please do call 999 if you're able. You can also call the National Domestic Abuse Helpline, and the phone number is 0808 2000 247, and I will try and get that into the YouTube chat. Or you can go online to their website, which is nationalhelpline.org.uk. So yeah, again, we just want to be conscious that we're signposting people as much as we can throughout the session. I'll also be announcing the winner of our International Women's Day goodie bag, which I've got somewhere. 1 second. So we've got a bag full of goodies with, I think there's a t-shirt in here, there's a journal, there's all kinds of really great things. So one of our audience will be winning that today, so we'll be announcing that later. We will schedule a break for around 8 o'clock ish for about 10 minutes or so. So the break is as much for for us as the panelists as for you guys. We're really excited to be able to bring you this, but also self-care and the well-being of each other is really important. So we'll be taking a break, allow you guys to pop off, have a comfort break, grab a cuppa, and then come back for the rest of this event. So yeah, I think it's time to introduce my wonderful panelists. So Maz and Yvette, do you want to put your screens on? Wonderful. Hello, my ladies. So, Maz, I don't know, my wonderful, wonderful friend. Do you want to just, introduce yourself to everybody? If you want to share a little bit about your kind of professional background and experience, and maybe just some of the things that you've had to come through to get to this point.
Yes, certainly. Good evening, everybody. I am Maz Alexander, and I do wear many hats. So I have a background in adult mental health social work. So I work with people with acute psychiatric disorders. And I'm a mother, I am an author, and I also use those skills, and I'm a well-being coach. But aside from that, I am a survivor of abuse, various types, but primarily tonight we're going to be talking about my experience with narcissistic abuse within the home, and also spiritual abuse, which are two types of abuses that are quite subtle and quite insidious, and they can be difficult to experience. And from the outside looking in, the perpetrator often looks quite charismatic, quite charming, and people would say, well, what's your problem? That, oh, you're overreacting, or you're being too sensitive. And often they say that because it's not always physical, although with me there were some physical physical abuse did go on. But I will talk more about that later, about what that looks like and the impact that it had on me. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Maz. Yeah, it is so important for us to raise those, the abuse you can't see, the abuse that you can't quantify or explain sometimes, and I've had those situations where I'm trying to, you know in your gut something is wrong, but you don't have the language with which to explain it. So sessions like this are really vital. So we're really excited about what you've got to share with us, Maz. Let me hand over to the lovely Yvette. If you'd like to just, introduce yourself, your, professional background, and kind of what's brought you to this point, and just some of the things that you've experienced.
Thanks, Dionne. Hi, everyone. I'm Yvette Dooley, and I'm a teacher trainer. I work predominantly with schools and workplaces, embedding wellbeing into their systems. But then I also coined Lioness Relaunch Academy, and that was because like Maz talked about, we're thinking about domestic abuse tonight, and my experience of domestic abuse while being in a Christian community, it was exactly what you've just explained. The narcissistic traits, really difficult to deal with, but that entwined with spiritual abuse, again, it's really difficult. And I remember on the last event that you held, Dionne, somebody was talking about how they'd been experiencing domestic abuse while they were part of a Christian community. And it was really difficult to recognize it, but also to accept that it was actually happening. And it was what it actually was, because we move into Christian communities as a space of safety, as a space of security. So it's a characteristic that we don't expect to see. But unfortunately, it is there. And I think what I found, for me, it was more coercive control, manipulative, narcissistic behaviors that I was dealing with. So it was really challenging because it was difficult to identify. It was difficult for me to identify. So for anybody within the Christian community, it was also difficult to identify. But what I found as well was that in our Christian community, there was just a lack of awareness. And because of a lack of awareness, there was a lack of understanding. And it was that pushed me into creating Lioness Relaunch, and building courses to help educate organisations, faith-based organisations, so that we can better support other people who might be experiencing the same thing.
Well, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Yvette. So yes, I am Dionne Simpson. So my professional background is not really directly related to domestic abuse at all. However, I have worked with vulnerable communities for a very, very long time. I also currently work as head of faith partnerships for a company that provides places of worship for all faith backgrounds. So I'm in quite a lot of contact with people from different faith backgrounds. I'm also a survivor of domestic abuse. I mean, it's trying to find where to start. I met somebody who, you know, seemed amazing, and as I think Yvette pointed out, really charismatic, you know, wealthy, their own business, and, you know, I got totally swept off my feet. And unfortunately, I'd grown up in quite a closed environment, so I'd kind of been starved of, you know, basic knowledge. And, you know, I'd never heard of, you know, an abusive relationship. I'd never heard of domestic abuse. So when things started to happen, and I knew something bad was happening, but I couldn't explain why. And I think that was one of the kind of key things throughout the abuse I experienced, was not really having the language for it at all. And, you know, it started off with things like, you know, wanting to control my money, you know, asking me to, you know, move in with them and give up where I was living. Then I go and work for them. And then it, you know, then it was kind of like, oh, well, you can't go here because I need you with me. And it's, you know, when you're in love, you feel all that, oh, they just want to spend loads of time with me, you know. But it escalated quite quickly. You know, picking fights because he thought that, you know, I'd spoke to somebody at the shop for too long, so that I must be having an affair. You know, insisting on going through my telephone bill to see who I'd been talking to all month, you know, not letting me have access to my own money, not letting me choose my own clothes, you know, to the extreme of putting my makeup on, not letting me to go to places by myself. And so these, you know, it escalated to this kind of a huge level of control, which, you know, in his defense, I had allowed, because I didn't know that these things were red flags. So yeah, that, and I would say it got very extreme in terms of length of time that it occurred. So the abuse occurred over a period of 18 years. And we were only together for 2 of those 18 years. And I know everyone's like, you know, when you're in abusive relationships, they're like, leave, you got to get out. And, you know, leaving, yes, we should definitely do that. But I think it's also, you know, we have to acknowledge that just because you have separated from somebody doesn't mean the abuse stops. And that was what my experience was. And in fact, it escalated. And, you know, statistics show us that that is the most vulnerable time for a woman, is when she has left an abusive relationship. You know, they are more likely to be physically harmed and killed. And we see that in the news so often. So, you know, I'm really passionate about talking about those kinds of things, not to put a damper on, you know, oh, you might as well stay. That's not what I mean. But, you know, to make sure that women have got the right support around them, and to help prepare them and their children and their families, to protect them as much as possible. So yeah, that's my background. Oh, I'm also an author, almost forgot. But we're not doing the book today. I already said we're not doing it today. So I think we're ready to start with some of our panel questions. So what I'm going to do is I've got the panel questions up on slides. So I'm going to read out the questions, and then I guess, you know, whoever wants to chip in first, or, you know, passionately wants to respond, let's do that. And then I guess we can go from there. So let me just get to our first question. If I can figure out how to make my own PowerPoint work. Here we go. Brilliant. So, first question, survival in silence. many victims of domestic abuse, especially in faith settings, struggle with speaking out. Can you share a moment when you realised you had to break the silence and what gave you the courage to do so? Anybody want to go first? Oh, I'm happy to go first, actually. Sorry. So yeah, let me just put that down. So yeah, having had multiple experiences of speaking out about abuse and it actually being detrimental to me within a faith setting. And I've had experiences where, just not believed, where you've been victimized and been told that this is your fault, you're a liar, or why have you done this to this amazing person? Just a refusal really to accept that it could ever have occurred. And feeling, not just feeling, being ostracized, and I think for me that being ostracized and singled out and black sheeped lasted for 25 years. I'm not gonna lie, it was a long time. And even when I was trying to speak out during that time, it was almost like I was having to do it undercover. So some people will know that I used to write. So I've always done blogs and journals and things around my experiences. But even then, I wasn't really free to do it as me. And so I used to write everything under a pseudonym, Donna Ward, which some of you will remember. So I wrote as Donna Ward for 15 years because really it just wasn't. I didn't have a safe environment to be able to speak my truth and share what was happening without it causing me more harm and grief. I think the straw that broke the camel's back and made me decide to stop doing that and just speak up as me was my very first book, Forged by Fire, which was also published by Marcia M Publishing House. Super proud of it. I suspect I know who has done this, but what they did was they caused my book and my publishing account with Amazon to be banned, and I got kicked off the publishing platform and my book taken down. I wasn't even furious. To me, it was just kind of, okay, so it's time. If me hiding, and trying to, do, share my story in a secret way so nobody knows, but I can still get it out, isn't working, then, in the nicest possible way, screw it. And, I stopped using Donna Ward. I started speaking and writing as myself. And it has been single-handedly the best decision I've ever made. I would just like to qualify that with, it's not the right decision for everybody. You've got to stay safe. I was really fortunate that my abuser had passed away. So that, that threat really had been removed from me. So that was the thing. I just thought, if I'm still going to be silenced in this way, then no, you're not going to do it. Yeah, who would like to kind of contribute next?
I don't mind. Yeah, a similar experience. There is that, experience teaches you. So, if every time you mention any concerns that you have, especially to higher authorities within the faith community, and they dismiss it and they try and cover it, you soon learn to shut up and endure. And of course, and I know Yvette knows this as well, that the use of the misuse, I should say, of scriptures, that things like, honor your mother and father. I know some leaders see themselves as your governors, as your mother and father, and things around, just submission and being faithful and all sorts of things which are misinterpreted and used to keep you in a place of oppression. So I know for me, when I had concerns, because you see that the people at the time, I doubt they're even aware today. They think they're doing God's work. So, when I started to have suspicions and raise them and speak with other people, there was an element of gaslighting. Are you sure, Maz? No, they were just looking out for you. They only wanted to protect you. And it was quite coercive. There were times, I decided it was time to speak out because it was affecting my faith. It was affecting my moods. I had these depressive episodes and they were prolonged and affecting my functioning. I thought, I can't live like this. This is not good. And eventually I did leave. But sometimes for me, I always think, is it me or is this really happening? So I wanted, I guess, sufficient evidence, and I stayed in that situation for a few years. I mean, how many signs, how many red flags do you need? But for me, I didn't want to be seen to be disobedient or rebellious, as I've been accused of being, and maybe I am to an extent, can be a rebel. But it wasn't helpful for me because I was unable to serve, I was unable to contribute, I was unable to grow. And I had to really critically analyze what was going on, because that was one of the things they did. They kind of stifled. I mean, I know, blind faith has its place, but it wasn't faith in God that they were advocating. It was faith in them, and and they are fallible human beings. So it kind of messed me up a bit. So I had to decide that actually enough is enough. This is not what the faith is about. Surely there's more to life than this. I don't like it. And, I did pray about it, and I found ways, which obviously we'll talk about later. But the suffering in silence is very common because you're shamed, and nobody likes to feel shame or guilt, because the minute you mention something, you're the troublemaker. Even in a professional circumstance, if you're a whistleblower, nobody, no one wants to be around you, even though, you become the problem. So I think that's a large contributing factor to why so many of us on the spiritual journey have had to just kind of put up and shut up. And also this misguided belief that I initially had, that I was doing the right thing. It might be a bit hard, but you've got to toughen up, and it will be for my good in the end. And all these things that I convinced myself that weren't true. I was merely repeating what they had said. So I think that was it in a nutshell for me. I decided to leave. I decided to get help, and I started to research. I always research, and I want to know if what I'm thinking, because I'm aware, and that's one of the effects. Sometimes our thinking can be distorted as a result of the abuse. But I always want to check. I want to check if what I'm believing is true. So when I measured it against their own standards, the faith standards, it didn't align. When I measured it against so many other criteria that they set, I was like, no, that's not right. It's not right. And I told them this. I presented it to me, and they as much told me, well, if you don't like it, there's the door. And I said, bye, see you later. So here we are.
Yeah, it's still hard to hear that kind of thing, Maz. It's still hard to hear some of those things. I'm going to make comment, but I'll hold it till later. Do you want to chip in, Yvette?
Yeah, thinking about the time, what led up to me finally speaking out. It'd been very, very difficult for me to speak out because what had happened in my situation is that he'd already prepared the grounds. So there were we attended a big church, beautiful church, lots of awesome people. But some of those people had opinions on me based on the things that he was saying. And the thing is, with my personality, it's pretty much the same wherever I am. It's pretty much the same. Some, quite a bit loud, this, that, and the other. But with him, very, very meek and very, very mild. So anything that came from him seemed to be truth, even though a lot of it was very, very untrue or manipulated. So I would be told at different times, oh, you've let the church down. The people aren't happy with you because of this, that, and the other. And I love God. And one of the things that I was really constantly concerned about was my worry about dishonoring God. I wanted to make sure that I was honoring God. But I think what really tipped it for me was when they came to my family, because when we started to separate, I did have a pretty good support network in terms of family and some church members as well. But it was when they came to my family without me knowing, telling them that I was evil, dealing with dark spirits and whatnot, convinced my family member. So, I mean, they would say things like that and, I'd just be able to deal with it. But once they convinced my family member and that family member was approaching me to tell me about myself and that I needed to fix up because I was evil or this, that, and the other, that's when I thought, no, not having this. And that's when I started to really begin to speak about it because I had to shut it down because I'd come into a space that was kind of a safer space from all of that. But for him to then try to bring that into my support network, it wouldn't have been great for me, obviously. It wouldn't have been great for my children. So that's what the first time that I started to speak out. But then, I think I'll answer a bit more later. But then I also realized that in order to speak out, I needed to educate myself. I needed to educate myself so I could communicate the issues more effectively. But we'll talk about that a bit more later on. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Yvette. I mean, just on that, and so I think a really important thing that is often missed when we're discussing, domestic or any other kind of abuse, and it's that narcissistic trait of recruiting people against you. And it is absolutely huge. I mean, what shocks me is the amount of times this has happened to me, right? And you start to think, did I deserve this? And I've had it in so many situations. I know that being a Black woman plays into that. Absolutely. So, having going through a domestic abuse situation, separated from my husband at the time, and the church pastors did, not a phone call, not a text, and I'm still going to church every Sunday. After about 5 weeks, I was vexed. I was like, what's been going on? Nobody's picked up the phone to text me, to call me, to see how I am, to see how the kids are. And I will never forget the response. They were like, well, we think you've got some things that you need to address about the way that that you've been treating him and your anger issues. And I was like, excuse me? And I was like, where did you get this from? Like, I don't have any history of anger issues. I ain't never been. And I was like, this dude has got a police record that's 9 pages long, right? And honestly, I couldn't believe it. And I've had it so many times, turning up to somebody's house who's agreed to look after the kids. Oh, well, I've been told that you're going out to be excuse the word, a prostitute. So no, I won't look after the kids for you. Really? Having the police called on me because a doctor thought that I was a threat. And it's just, I see it so much, and I don't let it lie now. I don't fight with everybody about everything, but that, having people recruited against you is wild. So yeah, thanks for raising that. It's a really important thing for people to understand, especially when potentially they're the ones being manipulated. You don't need to listen to every story. You don't have to have an opinion about everything. And sometimes the best thing you can do is, if somebody wants to talk to you, that's fine, listen. Then we signpost. And the reason that we signpost is that then we're not being the ones making that judgment call about whether this is true or not, about whether this person did this or not, and we can still maintain our, support in that person's life without becoming a judge. So yeah, super important. Right, I think I'm going to move on to our next question. So I'll just put it up on screen. So yeah, the impact of emotional and psychological abuse. So often emotional and psychological abuse is harder to identify, which I know Maz kind of raised earlier, because it's, there's no physical signs really. So can you share how this played out in your experience and how you kind of recognized it, and what kinds of things did you do to kind of break free from it? So yeah, do you want to go, Maz?
Yeah, I can do. Yes, there's so many things, and like you say, Dionne, with this kind of thing, it can be difficult to find the language. But okay, let me first address what it looks like, because, like I said, especially with narcissistic abuse, it is quite subtle, it is quite insidious. And I know these days people use the word narcissist when they're applying it in a dismissive way to, he's someone who's vain or thinks highly of themselves. And I know people say we're all on the spectrum somewhere, but I'm talking about specifically narcissistic personality disorder, which you can look in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which gives you the criteria. There are common traits and displays, and it's quite dangerous because many of these people tend to be very great. They're in leadership positions. They're very successful, mainly because they're so ruthless. They will step over anybody. And so what that looked like for me, it started, and it was by various caregivers, various authority figures initially. And I didn't know anything about narcissism, and it was only in the last 15 years that the language began to come from it to describe what was happening, because I thought I justified it by thinking, well, we're from the Caribbean, and it's hard. This is what Caribbean people do. And until I saw other examples of healthy relationship, I'm thinking, oh, it's not always like this. But essentially, if I could name it, so what it looked like for me was, that they typically didn't have any respect for my boundaries, my body, my possessions, my finances were not my own. There was that entitlement that whatever I had, they must have. And that might just look like, even being younger, just not having privacy when you're trying to shower or use the bathroom, and then being accused of being a whore because, well, you like to get naked, maybe you should get naked for all the men. And it's like, what? I'm a child. What are you talking about? That kind of thing. That kind of language, the shouting. But then in church, it was a different story. So a different presentation in public than what was behind closed doors. It was physical at times. It was, even up until adulthood. Even an example I'll give you more recently, about last 10 years. I remember saying, can you just please respect my boundaries? And they said, what boundaries? What boundaries? And then the next thing I know, the grill from the stove, if you've got a gas cooker, that was going to be wrapped around my head if I didn't move quick time. So I had to, because the person charged, that's narcissistic rage. It's often unwarranted and unprovoked. Or you might just get a punch to the face without warning, or what have you, or just being roughed up a bit. But that's obvious, because that leaves physical bruising and scars. And Yvette, I completely understand what you were saying. That smear campaign, that's the word for it, Dionne. The smear campaign that happens when they recruit others, the flying monkeys, by the way, to do their bidding. And these can be often, again, authority figures. Often, I'd get family ringing me from overseas. Oh, what are you doing? You're destroying this family. and I'd be accused of being the aggressor. You know, whenever you spoke about your pain, it was like, well, what are you talking about? I was sent away. I lived in Jamaica for a few years because perhaps I was speaking out about that. But even let's look at what it looked like, because it's difficult when you're a child. You're under this, you know, subjection of you know, your family and what have you. But in adulthood, so it looked like gaslighting. It looked like, you know, when they question your reality, often when you raise things about the injustice of it all, it was a case of, oh, that never happened. What are you talking about? I'm like, you did. I've got the scars to prove it. Oh no, you're. And then when the evidence is there, they say, well, you're just weak. You're just sensitive and you're weak. And then you think, huh? And then when everyone else is saying it, be they members of the church or whoever, family members are like, no, they wouldn't do that. Why would anybody do that? I find, you know, Dionne, people don't have a concept of what evil is. So whenever heinous acts, we hear it in the news, don't we? Whenever there's a serial killer, the neighbor will say, oh, but he was such a sweet boy. I'm like, no, ma'am, he's just killed 10 people. What are you talking about? So I think people don't like to mess up the narrative of, you know, especially when it comes to family members. Why would auntie or grandma or your father or anyone do anything? These are supposed to be nurturing people, but not everybody is. It looks like so apart from the physical, it looks like attention seeking. It looks like that sense of entitlement, ruining your wedding day or for me, you know, birthdays, anniversaries, feigning illness. I'm sick. Oh my gosh. Oh, I can't breathe. You know, that kind of thing. And it's like all the time, there's nothing wrong with the person, but using illness as a means to gain sympathy and what have you. And then everybody say, you're so cruel. Can't you see this person is in pain? And it looks like a lot of things, a lot of name calling. Satan, that was the biggest one, whore, all kinds of manner of things. You're stupid. You'll never amount to anything. Were typical. Those were the nicer ones. I don't want to use too many expletives here. So those are just some examples. And the psychological damage that left residual effects that still I've been in a process of healing for well over 20 years. And I'll talk to you more about my coping strategies and what healing looked like for me. But before I could even begin to heal, I had to acknowledge that something wasn't right. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't just a Caribbean experience. It's not normal. It's not right. At best, it's dysfunctional, but it's quite destructive. It causes soul wounds. So what you're left with is a sense of hypervigilance, which I still have today, by the way. I won't let anybody come behind me on the set. Nobody should be behind me. Don't stand behind me. I don't like that. I don't know if you're going to push me. What you're going to hurt me? You're going to choke me? What are you going to do? So, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say British cues still kill me now because I'm the same. I don't want nobody stood behind me.
Don't stand too close to me. What are you doing? Back up. And of course, for your average person that hasn't experienced, they'd be like, what do you mean? Oh, you're just being funny. And of course, you don't have time to explain that to everybody. I just say, no, I don't like that. And what it looks like now, yeah, trust issues. You're suspicious. You don't know, especially of me now in the church. I'm like, what do you want? What? Don't come to me with all that love bombing, hugging me and telling me you love. You don't know me. What are you talking about? So it's very difficult for me, and it also affected my relationship with God because I was judging him by man's standards, which of course is not the case. And of course, another thing was, you mentioned about the control and coercion. Yeah, finances were taken away. Couldn't have anything of my own, and walking on eggshells because you don't know when they're going to switch. And they literally would switch, you know, for the slightest thing. I remember, what was it? I just made a cup of tea and, you know, come home from work and start smashing up the plates, smashing up the kitchen because I'd made a cup of tea. What? It just didn't make any sense. So all of that will have you questioning yourself. It caused me to struggle to regulate my emotions, to even trust myself to make my own decisions, because for years other people had been making the decisions for me. I didn't think I deserved anything. I wouldn't allow myself to even you know, have a holiday. Of course, I'm over that now, dear, because as you know, I travel all the time on an adventure, and I give myself nice things. But for a long time, I thought, no, you don't deserve that. You just be quiet, keep a low profile, don't trouble nobody. And it just, yeah, anxiety, depression was also part of it, affecting my self-esteem. I always felt that I was just not good enough. And yeah, the generational impact. So that's why when I had my own daughter, I did want to put a stop to that, because I thought, nah, she can't be going through all of this. And that's the very reason why I do what I do. And I'm sure it's why we all do. Many of us are called, you know, wounded soldiers. And we're just trying to improve things for people, because it's awful, isn't it? It's an awful thing to have to, it's almost like the narcissist has given you a bag of burdens and said, yeah, have that, carry it. You're like, I don't want it, but you're carrying it. So it's taken years to dismantle all of those things, that all those legacies that I didn't want it, don't give it to me. So yeah, it's been a process. Thank you.
Have you got anything to add to that, Yvette?
Yeah, I think I'm just reflecting on the question. It was about the impact, wasn't it, of psychological emotional abuse? And what you're saying there, Maz, I think that's something that's key. There's a process to healing, and it doesn't matter how long it takes. However long it takes, it's okay. Can you hear my background noise? Is that okay? Oh, okay, super. And I knew that once we'd kind of finalized closure, I needed to engage in counselling. But even when I was in those counselling sessions, I still found it hard to communicate the things that I'd been through, because a lot of the things that a lot of the behaviours that you were describing, Maz, seemed to be from an overt narcissistic perspective. But what I was dealing with was a covert narcissistic perspective. So it was that still that Jekyll and Hyde personality, but it left me with a lot of questions, and I think and I have to say, a lot of the people within my church community were really good, even if they didn't understand it in terms of reaching out. I couldn't always respond because I was trying to deal with all of those things. But there were people who were reaching out, had a good pastor, had a good spiritual mum as well. I have a good spiritual mum as well. But I think when it came to lots of other people reaching out, one of the I mean, I was exhausted anyway with trying to manage everything with my children, but it was also trying to negotiate or figure out where the smear campaign had been or had gone. And when I was having conversations, I'd be able to pick up if the smear campaign had reached them based on their communication and their opinions. I remember being at church the one day, and this lady, I can't remember who it was now, but she placed a piece of paper in my hand and she said, please, please take this, please receive it. And I remember when I took it home, it was saying that I needed to repent from my wickedness, from my wicked ways and my iniquities and all of this kind of stuff. And I was still checking myself. And I remember at one point I recorded a situation that we were having, because I was thinking, is this really me? Is this happening? Am I shouting? It's telling me I'm shouting, but I don't think I'm shouting. And he thought I was recording for his sake, but it wasn't. I was recording for my sake because I really felt that I needed to check myself. But it's also looking at the physical impact that psychological, coercive, spiritual abuse can have. I got to a point where I was in hospital and they were telling me that I was having a heart attack. My troponin was rising. I tested positive for a D-dimer. And even at that point, I still wasn't really registering, but my health was absolutely declining. But then when I came out, my health started to pick up again. But I did used to question when I was in it and when I was out of it as well. Why didn't my church community know? We talk about the discerning spirit. why didn't they pick it up? Why didn't they see? Why can't they see? Some of them did see, actually. I think many did see. But then I also, sorry, I also developed patience for that as well, because how were they supposed to see it if I couldn't even see it myself when I was in it? Do you know what I mean? The same tactics that were being used for me were being used for them as well. And you know, at the end of the day, if somebody's good at manipulating, then people can be manipulated. And I don't think that all the time people don't want to help because they don't love or they don't care. I think it's because people are misinformed, and through the grooming process as well. Do you know what I mean? This kind of thing doesn't take place overnight. It happens over a period of time. But this is why embarking on the healing process is crucial. And it's crucial to accept that it takes time. And it's okay to have what you need in order to take time. I felt that God brought me to a place where, because for 3 years, my car hasn't been working properly. I can only do short distances. Doesn't make any sense. I've paid thousands of pounds to get it fixed. Every time I get it fixed, the red engine light comes on again. So I can only do short distances, and even then it's like 35 miles an hour. But during that time, I was able to silence the noise, because in communities that love you and care for you, they still come with lots of different opinions and thoughts that are mixed in information based on the smear campaign. But silencing the noise gave me that time to work through a healing process. But the other part of the healing process was dismantling a lot of the emotional, psychological, and spiritual abuse through studying the Bible and beginning to really dig down into those scriptures to find out the true meaning of how they're supposed to be interpreted and how we're supposed to move with them and heal from them.
Thank you so much, Yvette. Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to that is in terms of the impact of what other people might see somebody else going through. So for me, it looked like just being absent. I was being prevented from, visiting my family, from, going out with my friends. I recall I had a season where I was at night school, and he wouldn't let me drive to night school by myself. Luckily, I had a local friend who was also going, but when we arrived, he had told us she had to ring him to let him know that we'd arrived. Then when we get in the car on the way back, she'd have to ring him again when we were leaving. And, I would still get, quizzed and verbally assaulted about how long it took you to get back. You're 20 minutes later than I thought you were, and overbearing. So, is their partner or spouse, whatever, are they asking you to feed back to them? Are they asking you to keep tabs on somebody? Has somebody just disappeared out of your life? Some people will know that I had an addiction to drugs. And for me, it was trying to escape the jail that I found myself in, the jail was a physical one, but it was an emotional and psychological one. I'd been made to give up my home, my job, my family, my friends, my money. I couldn't decide what clothes I wore, couldn't decide where or what we ate. I was with this guy 24/7 every day. I was working at his business because, again, charismatic leader types. And don't get me wrong, to this day, like, he will forever impress me in the workplace because the dude was on fire. Yeah. But I wasn't allowed to go to the toilet by myself. So if I needed to use the bathroom, he would come to the bathroom with me and watch me go to the bathroom, because he was too worried that, something might happen if I was allowed to. And it was just the most ridiculous things. And that was happening in public view. His staff was seeing the fact that he was coming to the toilet and nobody said a thing. you know. I definitely had friends who recognised that I was missing. People who couldn't get me on the phone because, particularly after I'd left, he would call my phone 50 times a day. Now, I don't know if anybody else has had the experience of your phone ringing 50 times a day. And when you answer it, it's just a tirade of abuse. Yeah. And then if you stop answering the call, then ringing the landline. You leave the landline off the hook, but now you can't call the police, and now he's banging at the door. You know, you go to work, secretary's in tears because your husband's been on the phone for 40 minutes wanting to know where I am, what car did I arrive in, who, like, what time did I get there, who was I with, where am I with, you know. And that, I mean, there's no wonder that I was doing drugs. Like, you know, the pressure, the absolute pressure that caused. So I would definitely say things like, you know, addiction, sleeping, eating disorders. That's the other one, sleep as well. Sleeping and eating. So I mean, I still have diagnosed sleep disorders to this day. Me and sleep are, you know, we're not friends, right? We are just not friends, because the trauma of the things that I've gone through will not, my body is in fight mode permanently. I think, how did you describe it, Maz? What was the term you used, Maz?
It's fight or flight. Yeah.
So
yeah,
just
fight or flight.
Yeah, I think you used a different term. But it's like that, but hypervigilant. There we go. It's that hypervigilance, you know. Even this week, you know, my neck's cricked. And a lot of it is just that kind of like PTSD, you know, the PTSD of having gone through some of the stuff that we've gone through. And I think that's what other people could recognize, that there's something wrong. You know, if you've got a friend who's drinking too much or smoking too much, or, you know, abusing substances, whatever that is, the first thing shouldn't be, you're bad, you're wrong, what you're doing, you're killing yourself. You know, think about why is that person doing that, and you will find behind every single addict are stories like ours. Every single addict, there are stories like ours. So, you know, I think it's just a bit of a wake up for, you know, everybody really, to be less quick to judge, quicker to dig a little deeper, because it's a cry for help a lot of the time, a cry for help. Right, let me have a look at what time. Oh, the time's disappearing on us, late. It's 8 o'clock already, man. So I think what I'll do is we'll do one more question. Let me have a look. Do that one last. Right, I like this question. So we'll do this one question now, and then I think what we'll do is we'll have that 10-minute break, and we'll come back, and I think, Yvette, you're scheduled to do your presentation about the Lioness relaunch courses. And then if we've got enough time, and there's just maybe one or two other panel questions that we could kind of circle back to. So yeah. The next one I want us to look at is breaking generational cycles. Domestic abuse can have a lasting impact on families. You know, and all of us here today have, you know, we've all got children, and we've had to come to terms with the impact that our choices and the things that we've been subjected to have impacted our children. So how did your experience affect your family unit? And, you know, what, if any, steps have you taken to kind of address healing for you and, you know, whatever, and what the people in your family unit? You want to go first this time, Yvette?
Yeah, this is a big one.
Yeah.
And it's a very, 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 very important one. And I think that was one of the biggest issues for me, looking at how it would affect children. but not how it would just affect them now, how it would affect them later on in life, how it would affect their future relationships, and so on. And I remember talking to somebody about this because I was still trying to figure it out in my mind as well, and whether it be dishonoring God, this, that, and the other. You're trying to get the balance right and do the right thing. And everyone's telling God hates divorce, God hates that, you've got a covenant in marriage, and the children need the dad, this, that, and the other. And fair enough, and the children do. I believe that children do thrive well when they have both parents. But I've been working with children and young people for over 2 decades now. And when we're working with those children and young people, we're working with their parents. We're often working with their grandparents as well. So you get to see generational patterns. And one thing that I've found was that when children are brought up in environments where there is abuse, when those parents stay together, later on in life, those children have to deprogram what they've learned in relation to in terms of what's in terms of that, sorry, their experience of relationships. They have to deprogram from what they've learned, and then they have to learn what a healthy relationship looks like.
Well, I'll just interrupt you for 1 second, Yvette. I'm sorry to do this. My bad. Apologies. I just, something just popped to my mind. So growing up in a family where, like you said, there's abuses of different kinds. The child is trained to believe that that is normal.
That's
And I
right.
think that's the thing that we all need to remember, is that by staying in dysfunctional, toxic, abusive environments for a child, they grow up thinking it's normal. The best example I've got of that is when I went to, I was very fortunate. I ended up going to Teen Challenge, which is a Christian rehabilitation centre for, female, well, they do female centres and male centres, but it's, Christ-centred, Christian-centred. And they have women from all over the UK there, from really, really bad situations. You go through like your first month is detox, and you then kind of join the program. You've got kind of like cleaning activities. You have, church every day, Bible studies and education. You've got one-to-one counselling. It's they fill up your whole day. And they have a kind of like a disciplinary process. So, if you start kicking off because they've been asked you to do a job and you haven't done it, you can get a discipline, you get points off, or whatever it was, the system that they had. After 3 months, I didn't have a single discipline, because everything that I'd been told to do, I did. And it was my counsellor that raised the alarm. And she was like, "This is not normal, Dionne." And I was like, what do you mean? You've asked me to do something. I did it. I followed all of your rules, and you're telling me that's wrong. Like, I didn't understand it at the time. And she was the only person out of all the staff and professionals, she was the only one who spotted the fact that my compliance, my complete compliance, was a direct symptom of the way that I'd been raised at home, which was in this completely authoritarian, you're not allowed to ask questions, you can't challenge anything, you don't have like your own opinions, you can't make your own decisions, and all of these things. And I had just learned over time that I didn't have a voice, didn't have an opinion, didn't have a say, and the safest way to get through life was just to do what you're told quietly. So I started getting, it was weird, I started getting like, disciplines and punishments for not having broken the rules. It was weird. But they needed to find a way to, challenge me to find myself and my own opinion, because I didn't have any. I was completely, it's like I was an empty shell. just an empty shell. Like Dionne didn't really exist. It was just this robotic, yes, I'll do it, yes, I'll do it. And she had to find a way to break that. But she's the only person, you know, before or since, who has ever identified that. And we need people like that in our lives who can say, you know, who'd have that discernment, as you said, Yvette, that discernment to be like, okay, I know this looks normal to everybody else, but I know there's something not right, you know, and to have the integrity to, you know, maybe not act on it, but at least talk, you know, talk to somebody, pray, whatever it is. But yeah, so I just wanted to share that.
That's okay. Thank you for that. It's a perfect example of it, isn't it? So yeah, you've got the one side, if children remain in a setting, in a household where there is abuse between parents, then when they move on to their relationships later, or as they're moving through life, they have to deprogram from what they've learned, which is step one. And then step two, they have to learn what a healthy relationship is. Whereas when you've got children who are brought up in a single parent family home, free from abuse between parents, they've only got one step of the programming that they need to do, and that is to learn about what a healthy relationship looks like. And I think what we find as well is quite often within the faith community, we use the term generational curse. We've we've heard about that. Oh yeah, this is a generational curse. When you got that one bit, that's the same way mother do, you know, and same way Papa go on. Do you know what I mean? Oh, and but a lot of the time it's not a generational curse. It's actually generational trauma. Yeah, and that's why it's so important to look at breaking these cycles. And to break cycles, oftentimes the first step is education. Whether somebody accepts it or not is another thing. But at least if we can educate people, it's the first step towards change, creating change and breaking those cycles.
Thank you, Yvette. Have you got anything you'd like to add, Maz?
Yes, I'm glad Yvette mentioned about generational trauma. Yeah, there are times where it could be a curse, but essentially what we're talking about is generational trauma. And as I mentioned earlier, I knew for me, I didn't want that to be the legacy of my daughter. I do not want to pass certain things down. So even down to the basics, saying I love you, um, you know, allowing her to challenge me and come to, she doesn't have to agree with me. That was a freedom I was never allowed. You know, she doesn't have to get beaten for not, you know, agreeing, and all these things that have kind of been. I remember my grandmother was 108 when she died. She long life, and I remember asking for her wisdom. I was like, Grandma, you know, what should you do? You know, this is when my daughter was younger. How can we raise, you know, healthy children? Her response was, beat them. You beat them. You beat them. You beat them. I was like, oh, is that okay? She said, yeah. When they're rude and they're bad, you beat them. I was like, oh, thanks, Grandma. And I, of course, decided against that because I certainly didn't want. But that's very much what you were beaten into submission, and that's a terrible thing to admit. And that's why I got into the work that I do, because that's why I do want to break generational patterns. I want to disrupt those myths that we believe, especially within the faith community and within the African diaspora. Things about the notion of a strong Black woman. You know, does that mean, you know, you're rewarded for how many beatings you can take, how you endure all the hardships? And I don't think it's honorable at all. So I never really did subscribe to that. And I think it's great that we're having these conversations and challenging it more. There is the study, epigenetics tells us that, you know, how these traumas are actually passed down. The science says it. The Bible says it, you know. So when you have children, especially, the child knows when the child's unwanted. So if you're coming from generations of unwanted children, they carry that. You know, that's why particularly, for example, the African American community or Native Americans, when there has been histories of trauma, enslavement, rape, these kind of things, you may not have felt it, but if the fourth generation felt it, you're going to feel it too, inadvertently. even if you have been nurtured in a loving environment. So these cycles do need to be disrupted, and we need to have awareness about it. Why is it, if you've been adopted, why is it that I'm like great grandma Mary? Do you know what I mean? What is that about? And it's your DNA, and there are some things at work there. There are some spiritual things too. But the point is, for me, like I mentioned earlier about being the wounded soldiers, that's why I initially became a social worker, because I thought the system seems to be a bit broken here, and I want other people like me to have a voice. There are and there's still many voiceless people, because they are in that emotional cage that you mentioned, Dionne, because and Yvette mentioned this as well, about not wanting to dishonor the community, the faith community. You don't want to look bad and betray your family. You don't want, because the repercussions are real. They're not just imagined. So all of that. And I want to give permission for my offspring, my grandchildren, and my future to be able to express themselves, and actually to have a safe space to talk about their pain and heal from that, rather than suppress it and pass it on to their own children. So yes, I'm a big advocate of breaking those cycles, but we can only break them if we're aware of them. And for too long, we dismiss it, we endure it, and we just say, oh, how many times have you heard this, Dionne and Yvette? How many times do we hear people, especially in our community, well, I got a few beatings, but it was all right for me. Look, I've turned out all right. And I'm thinking, no, ma'am, no, you're not all right. That is why you're drinking that bottle every night. That is why you're a workaholic. That's why you're spending off all your money and you're in debt. What are you talking about? No, you're not all right. Don't convince yourself of that lie and then pass that lie on to your children. So yeah, it's about raising awareness and then taking steps. For me, I did lots of counseling. I'm a coach. I have a coach. Every coach needs a coach, right? And still working on that, because healing is essentially, like Yvette said, it's a process. It's like an onion. Some days you can be 2 steps ahead, and then the next week you're 5 steps behind, and you're thinking, I thought I was over that, but something triggers you. And you relive it all over again. And these are the indications that, that there's further work to do. And that's okay. It might take a lifetime. You might be okay in 5 years, but we've got to start the process. And I think for many people, they don't, because it is hard. It's hard work to be left with these feelings. I know I did. When I first saw a therapist, I thought, oh my gosh, I felt like a freak, first of all. Let me just say that. Yeah, that's the word. I'm like, oh my God, look at you. You're not normal, are you? Why do you have to go and see a professional because you're so damaged? And I hated that. It made me feel unworthy. It made me feel dirty. And as long as you feel like that, you tend to avoid, don't you? But we need to do the work, and that's how we ultimately break those cycles. Thank you.
Definitely. I think just to add to that, the breaking kind of generational cycles, and I only know this being much older now. So when we've all got, Caribbean families, Caribbean backgrounds, our parents' generation and their parents, even, it's almost like they're a silent generation. There's been so many things happen in the family that I never knew about. Nobody will talk about them, and this is from, such and such died in their sleep, or this one had, oh yeah, actually he had 5 families and there's so many kids we can't even find them all, or this one, children had cot death, or whatever it is. There's so many things that, one, they give us perspective. They give us perspective on our family and on our community. I could not, growing up in my household, like the way that my mother is with me, I couldn't dream of treating my child the way that she has treated me, ever, And it's only as, getting close to that half-century point, that having learned more about her family, and I'm talking, her parents, great-grandparents, all the, all the offshoots and the traumas that exist in those family lines, that make me realize that actually my family just has generational trauma. You know, we are descended from slaves, you know, and what we learned as slaves is that, you know, punishment, that's what we learn. Punishment and work, punishment and work. If I love you, I punish you. If I'm pissed off with you, I punish you. You know, and I remember being a kid and getting punished for stuff and being confused because I don't even know what I'm being punished for now, you know. And I heard, and it's an upsetting way of putting it, but I understand it, you know, that each of our like Caribbean families always have like a central person. You know, it tends to be matriarchal in our culture, but you know, it can be men just as much. And somebody said to me, we just swapped the slave, like we swapped the slave owner or overseer from the plantation, and now somebody in our family is now the overseer. And I was just like, I was shook because actually so many of our families reflect that. And there's like a single person who is dominating everybody else in the family. And we, oh no, that's just how it is. You like, don't vex them, don't upset them. You need to do as you're told. We don't, you know, we don't say the obvious, like they're hurting people. Nobody will say it, you know, and that is something that I see almost carried through into some of our Christian settings. I mean, for the love of Jesus, don't be telling me about no man of God. Like that, because that is a trigger. I said, no, I said, stop it with this man of God business. Let's just call them men. That's what they are. And yet some people might find it disrespectful, but I also find it disrespectful that people run around trying to use God's authority in order to manipulate and hurt other people. So I'm sorry, like you need to stop with that. I also have children, so I have lost a child, still alive, but through parental alienation, through domestic abuse. So my eldest child I haven't seen since he was 13 the last time I saw him, and it's been nearly 10 years now. And when you have a trauma like that, trying to not let the fallout of that impact every other part of your life is impossible. So I have another daughter, and you know, I was trying to deal with my own shock and trauma about the situation, whilst, you know, trying to fight to get my child back, whilst also trying to look after, you know, a very small child traumatized by the sudden departure of a family member, whilst also trying to, you know, hold down a relationship because I was married to somebody else by this point, plus everybody else's opinions about everything, you know, plus institutional racism with the police who don't want to know, social services don't want to know, school, oh, don't want to talk to me now. Honestly, it's stupefying when you're confronted with things like that. And as Maz mentioned earlier, oh no, is it not Maz, was it Yvette, I think, about a heart attack, you know, and having been hospitalized from the sheer trauma of what's going on with your life. I need to make sure that everybody knows you can only do what you can do. I have carried so much guilt about my eldest child, and you know, could I have done more? Could I have done this? Could I have done that? What if I should have said something different? But you know, and the fact of the matter is, you know, his father abducted him 3 times, you know, from the between the age of 2 and 13, and every time it was like police and courts and a whole thing trying to get, you know. And then when I said gone, I mean gone for, like, underground 2-3 months at a time. Nobody can find them. We've got to get private investigators out. It's been wild. But we as somebody going through those situations, and I know you desperately want to, you know, you want to protect your kids, particularly if you've got kids living with you, you can't always protect them. And I don't mean to say that we should just let them be exposed to everything. I have a child who lives at home with me now, and you know, their father is an addict still, you know, on and off the wagon, quite unwell at the moment, and we've been going through situations where he's been just verbally and emotionally and psychologically abusing my daughter and me over the telephone. You know, we ain't been together for many years, and I've had to say, and I didn't want to, I was just like, we can't talk to your dad anymore. I said, if you want to talk to him, like, you need to block him. When you're ready, you pick up the phone, you know, unblock him, talk to him, and then lock it again, because he doesn't have the capacity to respect her or to respect what she needs. I've had to be really honest, you know, when your 6-year-old is like, Mommy, where's my sibling? I don't got an answer. You know, I've had to have some really tough conversations. Why can't I see Nanny and Grandad? I've had to have some really tough conversations. Why can't we go to this place anymore? I've had to have some really tough conversations, supported by, you know, therapy. I mean, I've done all the therapies, you know, I've done electrolysis, you know, on the head, like done electrolysis, I've done the acupuncture, I've done CBT, done like your normal talking therapies, I've done EMDR, I have done the works, because I wanted to give me and my kids the best chance. But because I've been very open about that, when I suggest to my child, you should probably go and talk to somebody, because I'm not the person, you know, I can't hold all your burdens. I've got an opinion about everything because it's our life, you know. So my kid is quite happy to, actually, Mum, I think I'd really like to go back to counselling now, you know. And that was never an option for me as a child. So I'm really proud that I can't fix the life. I can't fix the trashy people in it. You know, I can't fix everything, but what I can do is raise a child who knows when something's wrong, knows how to ask for help, and that it's okay that the people in our lives are not necessarily going to do the best for us, but to acknowledge that, put boundaries in where we can to keep ourselves safe. But yeah, so that's been important. That's been important. Right. It's time's disappearing, ladies. So I think we're going to take our 10-minute break now. So we'll be back just around 8:30 for the last part of our event. You guys have been amazing, honestly. I love your confidence and your honesty, because, you know, the world needs more of it. So I'm so thankful and grateful to you both. So let's go and take a break, and when we come back, Yvette is going to give us a short presentation about the lioness research. So yeah, don't go anywhere. You know, get a cup of tea, come right back. Hi, welcome back, everybody, to Warrior Women. I'm Dionne Simpson, and the next part of our event, I am delighted to introduce Yvette Dooley, and she is going to give us a short presentation on her Lioness Relaunch Academy programme. Yvette, do you want to put your camera on?
Sorry.
There we go. Brilliantly. So yeah, in fact, I'm going to dip and let you do your presentation. Have you got a
Yeah,
point you want to share as well? I think, haven't you?
share my screen now. Okay,
Thank you. Take it away.
super. So, as we've been made aware, as we've talked about throughout this session, we're aware and we know that unfortunately domestic abuse does happen within Christian organisations as well. Sorry, and throughout this short presentation, we'll just look at some of the some different themes like how, excuse me, victims suffer in silence, the reasons why that might happen, accountability for not just leaders but believers within Christian communities. We'll look at a couple of recent law changes, and how the Bible calls us to justice, have justice, compassion, and accountability. This discussion is really, really important because, as we said, it's a hidden reality. And I think as I've been going through the process of developing these courses, I've been shocked, saddened, disappointed at the level of abuse that is occurring. And I used to think that it was something that was more historical, but unfortunately, it is still very, very common. And when it comes to silent suffering, yes, we understand that a lot of victims may be fearing judgment, rejection. There was a time, I would say about 30, it was still going on in the 80s, where if somebody wasn't doing the right thing, they'd be called up to the front of the church and they'd have to confess in front of the whole church and apologise to the whole church. But unfortunately, in some Christian communities, that kind of thing is still happening today. And also I mean, we're talking predominantly about women at the moment, but also men. For any victims of domestic violence, domestic abuse within the church community, the shame that comes with that, especially if it's backed up by a smear campaign as well, can be incredibly difficult to deal with. And like I said, we'll work on some of those. We'll look at some of those law changes that have happened. Now, about one in four women and 1 in 6 men experience domestic abuse within the UK. And for those who aren't sure, it takes different forms. Like Maz was saying earlier, it's not always physical. It can be emotional, it can be financial, it can be spiritual, and it can be coercive control as well. When it comes to domestic abuse within not just the Christian faith, but in different faiths, one of the barriers is misuse of scripture. I think one of the verses that you mentioned earlier, Maz, was that a woman is to submit to her husband. And quite often that's the verse that's promoted quite strongly. But we don't always look at the verse that talks about how a man is to love his wife as Christ loved the church. And as we know, Christ died for the church. But I think what's really important is that when we look at scriptures like this, Isaiah chapter 1, verse 17, it reminds us that we are here to learn to do good. And as Christians, representatives of Jesus Christ, we're here to seek justice and correct oppression. And we're supposed to be working to protect the vulnerable. So they're not necessarily new laws, but there have been changes to the laws. So coercive control, it's now managed like domestic abuses. So when if somebody is convicted for domestic abuse, they would be managed by what's called MAPA, and that's the Multi-Agency Public Protection Arrangements Programme. And basically that means you've got a circle of people around, including police, hospitals, social care, and any other public sector service. they have representatives who work together to make sure that any person who has committed an offence, such as domestic abuse, is monitored. But before, coercive control didn't come under that kind of monitoring, but it does now. We also have the new crime bill that has been it was introduced to Parliament in February, and that looks at failure to report, because what we find is in some faith communities that there's a lot of barrier when it comes to reporting incidents of sexual abuse. And it's not just sexual abuse, it's any kind of sexual abuse, historic sexual abuse as well. And sometimes incidents aren't reported because there are concerns about reporting somebody who might be a man of the cloth. You might have heard that term. Or because we have to leave it for God to deal with those kind of issues, when in fact it's really important that we understand that we're governed by the laws of the land. And I think what this new law does, is it helps to hold churches accountable. It reminds leaders, not just leaders though, I think anybody who is representing Jesus Christ, representing the Christian community, I think we have an ethical and moral and spiritual duty, as well as a legal duty, to report such cases. But it also calls for churches to be more educated and become more aware of things like coercive control. If churches are a lot more aware of things like coercive control, they're going to be a bit more aware of things like narcissistic traits, narcissistic behaviors, and they're more likely to be aware of those scenarios, aware of some of those situations taking place within churches, and aware of some of the grooming tactics that take place as well, so that we can if we're more aware, then we can stop certain things, but we can work with a mindset of prevention, can't we? There are not just, I think what's great now is that they're looking at legal consequences for failure to report, but then organisational accountability as well. But that comes with education. I think it was saddening to hear that the Church of England, they rejected an independent safeguarding board. They still want to have their own safeguarding board. I can understand why they would want to, but in my personal opinion, I think that it should be independent. And I think that it should be independent because there have been too many failures before this. And it's not just, I mean, while there are some legal consequences, I think the important thing to think about and to understand is the long-term consequences for victims of domestic abuse, for victims of any kind of abuse, especially when the perpetrator is somebody that represents the Christian community. But it's important now, I think, for churches to really start to wake up to what's happening, because the thing is, when we're representing Jesus Christ, we are to be thinking about healing, and we can only create an environment of healing when we embrace scriptures like we just talked about, that enable us to understand the need for justice, because justice gives space for victims to heal as well. We do need to gather our thoughts, and we need to act upon the lessons that we've learned from past failures. One of the cases that really got me was a gentleman that was interviewed on Channel 4. And when he explained that he had endured horrific sexual abuse from a leader of a church who acted as a mentor when they were children, when they were young. I think he was about 15 at the time. This leader acted as a mentor and asked the parents if he could take their child away with him as, you know, an experience, so that that young person could experience some leadership. And it was, I think it was a seminar weekend or something like that he was taking him on. And that in itself is grooming the parents. And this is what churches need to understand. It's not nice terminology, but we need to begin to have those conversations. And that leader took that young man, and the language that that young man used, he said, when we got to the space where we'd be staying at night time, he climbed over me like he owned me. And then that young man, that 15-year-old, he was stuck there for the whole weekend until he got back. And when he got back, he still wasn't believed when he did speak to certain people about it. This man, I think he's now in his, he's an adult now. I think he's in his 50s. But when you heard him speak, you could hear that young man, that little boy, was still trapped inside of him because he didn't have the opportunity to seek justice at that time. And he hadn't had an opportunity to even begin moving through a process of healing. So yeah, there are long-term consequences of inaction for each victim, for all of their family members, for their future families. But I think that it's a really important thing for us to really push the consequences of legal action for failure to act and failure to report. Some of these are missing off here. Oops, sorry, bear with me. So yeah, I mentioned earlier that one of the scriptures when it comes to domestic abuse that's often pushed is husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. But we really need to be understanding and emphasizing scriptures in a correct manner, because we're called to love one another. We're called to cherish one another. We're called to uplift one another. We're called to build one another. And in the Bible, husbands are called to love their wives as Christ loved the church, which is the ultimate love. Christ loved the church. Literally, he loved the church to death. Do you know what I mean? We're also called in Psalms 82, verse 3 to 4, to defend the weak and the fatherless and uphold the cause of the oppressed. We're called to protect the vulnerable. We're called to stand up and be an advocate for those who can't speak. All of those scriptures are in the Bible. And I think that, you know, these are the kind of scriptures that we really need to be educating ourselves on when it comes to things like domestic abuse. There was a lady, I think she was in America. She was suffering from domestic abuse. She spoke to a church leader about it. She was told to go and pray. She spoke to the council, the church council, about it. She was told to go and pray. Not long afterwards, she was killed by her husband, who was also a church member. And what's to say, if they had had that education, maybe they would have thought differently, or maybe somebody could have thought differently. If somebody had just enabled her to understand that she didn't have to stay, if somebody just let her know or just signposted her to some support services, she might be alive today. And that's just, I think it's the same for many others. But it's the important thing about education as well is that there are so many people who are experiencing domestic abuse in different forms, and they do not know that they are experiencing domestic abuse. And that's also because of historical trauma that we mentioned earlier on. 4 parents have experienced domestic abuse. So if somebody goes to if somebody goes to an elder person who experienced domestic abuse, sometimes the response they will get is, yeah, that's part of marriage. That's what happens. Marriage is hard. You have to work through it. You have to, oh, I've noticed the time. You have to pray. You have to keep praying. Those are the kind of things that people are hearing. So education, empowering and implementing policies, standing by clear reporting policies and having a zero tolerance attitude to domestic abuse is really important, as well as collaborating with agencies. The impact of good training for leaders is practical strategies. They utilize biblical insights so that they can effectively challenge abuse with scripture. It helps people to understand their reporting requirements and consequences of not reporting. But it also helps people to intervene in healthy, supportive, and effective ways. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to have a quick look. This should hopefully, no, it hasn't. Just bear with me a moment. Right. So if we have a look at some of the courses on Lioness Relaunch, when I saw that man from the Seventh-day Adventist Church talk about his experience, that was another thing that really pushed me to work on this. Because I believe that when we're representing Christ, we need to demonstrate that there is healing in Christ. There is healing within Christian communities. And so that's why I came up with Lioness Relaunch. And Lioness Relaunch is based on educating leaders, but it's also a model that enables people to be advocates for building awareness around domestic abuse and good safeguarding measures within churches. But it's also I also came to this idea with a mindset of supporting victims, because when I came out of my relationship, I was left with 7 black bags, and two of those bags were rubbish, and had my children to take care of, and I didn't have financial stability at the time. So for victims of domestic abuse, or for women who are coming out of domestic abusive relationships, I just wanted to create a model that would enable them to build some kind of financial foundation for themselves, either before they leave or after they leave. So we have things like, we have the affiliate program where somebody can just sign up to that program and recommend it. Anybody who purchases any one of these courses through the affiliate program is able to receive some funding for themselves, which enables them to build up their funds. But also, what thankfully, we've been able to develop facilitator courses, and the hope is that people will take those facilitator courses and then go out to their organisations and any other organisation across the country or across the world to disseminate the teachings. All of the courses are based on biblical principles and the teachings of Jesus, because what I have found is that a lot of Christian communities, a lot of Christian organisations absolutely do take on safeguarding training, and that's absolutely fantastic. But sometimes they struggle to fully carry out safeguarding measures because they don't see an alignment with scripture. These courses enable learners to see, understand, and implement safeguarding and protection by aligning scripture with the laws of the land. So that's Lioness Relaunch. If you've got any questions, feel happy to ask. I think that I've covered everything.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Yvette. I mean, just to let people know, I am also an affiliate with Lioness Relaunch now. So very shortly, I'll have some courses available on my website. and I will be doing a discount code. So for those of you who have registered today, you will get a discount code sent to you after the event, just to so that you can get on some of the courses with a little bit of a discount. So I'm really conscious that we're running out of time, so we probably will go over a little bit today. So I'm going to hand over to Maz to talk about her mental well-being support services. And I think after that, I will be announcing the winner of our International Women's Day goodie bag, and then I think we're going to have to close. So, but yeah, I'll hand over to you now, Maz. Yeah, great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies. I really enjoyed Yvette's presentation. And it's for me as well as a practitioner in the social work field to take that forward. One of the things I recognize is that even though we get a lot of safeguardings for domestic abuse, but yeah, like I said, the more subtle ones around spiritual abuse and things can be difficult to prove, even in terms of law breaking. So people tend to, well, within the profession, historically, what we've done is we've said, well, that's what happens in their communities, so we just leave it alone. The case of Victoria Climbié is an example of that. And we hear multiple cases of FGM where people have been brutalized as a result of certain ministers trying to perform exorcisms. All of these things are still going on today. I thought we'd moved on, but I'm still hearing frequent cases. So there's work to do. And all of this is why, like I said, it's part of me trying to make an impact on the system. So I saw, working in statutory services, we, especially in the African diaspora, are overrepresented in the mental health sector. The majority of my patients, they are of Black and minority ethnic backgrounds. Within the criminal justice system, we know we're overrepresented as well. But I was particularly interested in women, hence why I, working for the NHS and the local authority, I know what burnout is, and I saw that we were being affected. So this is why I have my coaching services, because when I had coaching, it really transformed me. And I thought, it was really, because it's very future focused, it's goal oriented. So I wanted to implement that in my practice, and that's what I did. So primarily what I offer now is I work one-to-one with women. Tends to be majority of women who are professional women who are caregivers. But those women tend not to have boundaries. Boundaries is the primary struggle that they have, because often they have backgrounds like us. They have had backgrounds with abuse, and they've been taught to people please all their lives and perform, and they overachieve. But it's now costing them their health. They're having physical symptoms. They're having emotional and psychological barriers that are stopping them from living functional and fruitful lives. So what I do, and I'm excellent at this, but I need someone else to do it for me. I help people to sort of reclaim their identity and to walk in their purpose. And really, often people just need permission. We it's almost like a self-flagellation that we do. We're like, no, I will suffer. Even after the abuse is stopped, I will continue to suffer. And maybe I'm a bad person and I don't deserve good things. I'll try and provide for my kids and my husband and everyone else, but I will not take care of myself. And it's a travesty to live life that way. So I help women to eliminate those limiting beliefs, the self-sabotage that we sometimes engage in, and help them to get the healing that they need, the self-care that they need, so that they can live authentic and fulfilled lives. And I do that. I have a group training as well that will be, that's not, the next cohort is in May, but primarily one-to-one is what I do. I do find that's quite effective, because often people are ashamed and they may not want group settings to talk about certain personal issues, especially when we're talking about abuse. But I'm interested to hear from ladies, especially if you've had narcissistic abuse within your family, especially, or any spiritual abuse in the church. But if you generally just want to set better boundaries and have a better quality of life, it would be really great to hear from you. And I also have written 2 books. The first one, Arise Kintsugi Queens, is about that very concept of reclaiming your identity and dismissing the notion of being an alpha female and a strong Black woman, and just getting your healing. And the second one that I wrote is called The Audacious Black Sheep, which is for all of us who are Black sheep, essentially. All of you have been told you're a bit too quirky, you're a social misfit, you didn't agree with the rest of the family or your communities, and you find yourself alienated simply because you don't think or act like them. You don't maintain the status quo, and that's the very place where your treasure is. So I help you to uncover that and to operate in your zone of genius. So my contact details, you'll see them in the background. Please feel free to contact me, even just for an informal chat. You can connect with me on my socials, and we can continue the discussion. So thank you very much for this platform, Dionne. Thank you.
Wow, that's awesome, Maz. Thank you so much. I mean, I know we've been friends a long time, Maz, and we've both been through so much individually, but also we've been able to watch each other and support each other through our healing journeys, which have been, up and down. But there is something so special about, like you were saying, about having that one-to-one coaching, because one of the significant impacts of any kinds of abuse is that lack of self-worth, that lack of confidence. I mean, I was well into my 30s before I had learnt to be able to say no, because I was conditioned my entire life that wasn't an option. We didn't have an opinion. I wasn't allowed to do that. And it took so much undoing to be able to, be comfortable and confident. I mean, I'm happy to say I love saying no now. I'm like, nope, nope, nope. And if, somebody, crosses my boundary, I've got no problem saying, we can't be friends anymore. We can't speak anymore. And people, oh, you're too harsh. You need to forgive. And all these things. And I'm like, it's not that I haven't forgiven them. I have forgiven them, but I choose not to have somebody in my life who is going to continually, cross my boundaries after I've asked them several times not to. And that is part of me keeping myself safe, me keeping my child safe. And, one of the best ways to do that is by, somebody who's able to hold your hand and encourage you through that, because it's so challenging. So yeah, thank you so much, Maz, and Yvette as well. You raised so many things in there that I've got so many opinions on, but we've got no time. I mean, just to say some of the things that you brought up, I had to do that thing where I had to stand in front of a congregation of 400 people and confess my sin, which people are horrified by. I remember seeing that as a child, and it split the church, and then growing up and then having that happen to me and seeing the same impact. I'm like, these are not things of God, and this whole kind of we assign attributes of God as being infallible, but then we put it on a person. We're like, well, people aren't infallible, are they? People are people, whether they're leaders, not leaders, and I think we've got to shake ourselves and our community and just be like, we can't, because somebody is a preacher, teacher, leader, minister, does not make them infallible, so let's stop creating situations that put people in harm's way. That whole thing you were saying about the like the Christian narcissist who's groomed the parents and is taking the child away to where, or the young person on like a one-to-one. I've you know, been on the receiving end of that, you know, and been the person who's been taken away. And I mean, like, oh no, I've got you, you know, I've got someone to look after your kid for you, you know, I'm going to be like your you know, Christian guru person. I'm going to really build you up and invest in you, and you know, all the buzzwords. So of course, the people around you, like, oh yeah, I'll have the kid, you know, and just being taken advantage of, you know. So yeah, and it's not that I know there's so many. I mean, I don't want to come off really harsh and critical. I mean, a lot of our churches are doing so much better, you know. So with the fact that we can have this conversation out in the open, and you know, people are willing to hear us, that is huge, you know, absolutely huge. But I know we can do more, but we can do more. You know, we're called to be the hands and feet of Christ, and you know, for us three, definitely, you know, this is part of what we're called to, and it's to support, you know, our brothers and sisters, both in the Christian community and in other communities, to be able to identify, prepare, protect, you know, meet obligations under the law, and become that safe place. Because very often, you know, faith communities haven't been safe, and I really want them to be, because you know, my faith is core to who I am. So yeah. Right, I'm just really conscious of the time. I am going to announce the winner of our lovely International Women's Day goodie bag. Let me just go and find my notes. So we have Rena from Leicester. Congratulations. I will be getting in touch with you to get details to send over your wonderful International Women's Day goodie bag, which is full of all kinds of things, and I'll pop a copy of my book in there for you as well. So this will be making its way to you today. I think just before we leave, very quickly, Yvette and Maz, can you just, you know, very succinctly, one or two sentences, what do you what is a warrior woman to you?
To me, a warrior woman is somebody who can see herself as much as she sees everybody else, and understands her worth as much as she understands everybody else's.
Amen. Thank you. Maz?
Yeah, what she said. Yeah, essentially, a warrior woman doesn't pour from an empty vessel. She is self-aware, and she's aware of her limitations, but her traumas, her adversities are actually her weapons, her strength, and she uses that to bless others. And she's not afraid to ask for help either. So that's a warrior woman to me.
Amen. That's honestly, that's what I would have said as well. You know, to me, a warrior woman is somebody who is aware, very self-aware of both her, you know, strengths and weaknesses, but also, you know, is not afraid to ask for help, is not afraid to be, like, you know, part of a community who can invest in her, as well as the woman investing in other people, and being able to do that investment, that give and take of investing in each other wisely, because we've all been, you know, had that person who will suck us dry and leave us for dead, you know. So it's about having wisdom, but also never giving up. And I don't mean in the sense of let's, you know, work ourselves to death and burn out. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying, when I say not giving up, even when we feel like, you know, even when we've lost a battle, and trust me, I've lost plenty of battles, that doesn't mark the end of me. That means I might need to go and take a season out, a season away from people, a season of healing, you know, but I am an active participant in my healing. You know, I'm going to go to therapy. I'm going to do my, you know, my Bible groups. I'm going to meet up with people who, you know, bless and encourage me and support me. And yeah, I think I eventually learned that nobody was coming to rescue me. And it sounds awful because, of course, we have surrounded by friends and family who want to help us, and some of them can, some of them can't. But I could only really get help once I decided that that's what I need. You know, how many times have we spoken to somebody and we're like, you are in a terrible situation, you need to be out, but they're not ready to leave yet. They're not ready to take that help yet, you know? So yeah, being able to know when they need help, be fine with asking for it, and being able to, you know, tell people what they need and to not give up, to me, is a warrior woman. So don't be discouraged. I believe everybody has a warrior woman inside them. You know, mine took many years to manifest. You know, I wasn't always like this, what you see in front of you today. It's taken time. And, you know, I think all three of us today have repeatedly said that healing is a journey. And, you know, we might get to come to the end of our lives when we're old, and there's still things that, you know, are not perfect, but that's being human. You know, we're not here to be perfect. We are here to continually grow, continually improve. Oh, sorry. And, you know, along the way, try and help and encourage other people as much as we can. So I think that is going to be the end of our session today. For those of you who have registered, it's probably going to be a week or so now, but we will send you information for you know, getting in touch with Maz about any coaching, about the Lioness relaunch program, updates on my actual book launch, which will be happening at some point in the future. If you've got any questions or want to contact any of the panel members, you can head over to my website and get in touch with me that way. I think Yvette's got her details on there. Everybody's on social media, I think, as well. Thank you as well to those who have been busy chattering on our YouTube comments. We've got Amy Clay and Armour 201 who have we've been having some deep conversations over here on the YouTube comments. I just want to read one or two of them. So this is from Armour 201. The compliance conditioning is one of the reasons that a victim or survivor's perception of the risk of harm is considered a high risk factor. And I was like, yes, somebody who gets it. And it really, really is. And, you know, faith communities are great at doing the compliance conditioning, for want of a better phrase, you know, and it's something that we do need to be wary of. Amy has commented, she said, one of the main things I'm going to take from tonight is the value of talking about our own healing. And I am so glad, because that's essentially what we're doing tonight, is talking about our own healing. And it's not only good for us as we, you know, process where we were to where we are now to where we want to be, but we get to share that with people. You know, I didn't have people who understood domestic abuse to really help me through that. So the fact that, you know, we can be that for other people, you know, makes me full of joy. Not joy that they're going through that, but there's just much more awareness, support available now for people going through those circumstances. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, no, that's it. I was just thinking, is there something else that I've missed? Anything else that I've missed, ladies? No. Okay, that's it. I'm going to shut this down for now, but we will see you at the next event.